Destiny is winding up its nearly decade-long story with the final shape. The Light and Darkness saga has been a long road since our ghosts first woke us up in the back of a wrecked car in the Cosmodrome, presumably after we passed out during an end-of-the-world tailgate party. A lot has happened since wizards came from the moon and strangers didn't have time to explain Jack to us. So whether you're a grizzled guardian or a newcomer to this series who just wants to jump in at the end, like those of us who watched the Lost finale even though we didn't really watch the show, eyes up as we brush up on the story of Destiny so far. Destiny is set about 700 years from now, where humanity has undergone a great golden age and a terrible collapse, and then rebuilt its civilization as gun-toting space wizards, all thanks to this big space ball, known as the Traveler. The Golden Age began shortly after the Traveler first arrived in our system, sometime in the late 21st century, appearing to be some strange moon that appeared around Jupiter, but clearly it was no moon. It soon began terraforming moons and planets before disappearing and coming back to terraform some more. We eventually managed to track it down on Mars and make contact, and it liked the cut of humanity's jib and decided to share its knowledge and powers with us. And like some big old interstellar romantic ball, it promised us the universe. Under its guidance, humanity entered the Golden Age, colonizing the entire solar system and creating technological wonders. It's a classic all meets species love story. It turns out though that we were not the first ones to get the affections of the Traveler. No, like some kinda giant spaceball Lothario, this genderless sphere has been around the galaxy and done the exact same thing to a bunch of other species, before just straight up ghosting them to shack up with a new species. So, of course, after a few centuries of everything going great between humanity and the Traveler, one of the Traveler's exes arrived, and they was pissed. This ex in particular had some serious history and baggage to unpack. Known as the Witness, they arrived with their Black Fleet, a fleet of pyramids, that promptly beat the hell out of humanity, causing the destruction of nearly all human civilization. This was the collapse. Explaining why they had such strong emotions is tricky. Like any eons long interstellar love triangle, it's a complicated affair to say the least. But long story short, billions of years ago the Traveler was found dormant on a planet by a species, and yada yada yada, it gave them a golden age that lasted for millions of years. But like some aloof space sugar daddy, the Traveler didn't really give them any love. It never communicated with them and just gave them prosperity and gifts. So they started to crave some more meaning from life. Then they discovered that the Traveler had a counterpart entity, the Veil. Where the Traveler's powers seemed to reside in the physical world, the things that light could touch, the Veil was the opposite. Its powers were linked to consciousness and thought, things that light could not touch, the darkness. Looking into this whole darkness thing, they discovered that by combining the Traveler and the Veil, it would lead to the final shape, a way to end all of the chaos and pain and messy heartbreak of the universe, by freezing it all into one perfect moment forever. Kind of romantic, but also kind of stalkery serial killer vibes. This gave them the meaning they had sought from life, and in their attempt to carry it out, the Traveler said, hell no, and packed its bags and got the heck out. Good for you, Traveler. No one should stay in a toxic relationship where they want to use you to freeze the universe forever. This apparently didn't sit very well with that species though, so they figured, hey, all of our minds are better than one, and used the darkness to combine all of their species' consciousness together into one entity, creating the Witness. Then they began a crusade to bring about the final shape. It's kinda like if all your exes combined into one super pissed ex just to get back at you. As the Traveler moved on, it did what all recently single floating orbs do. It hooked up with any species it ran into, and of course brought golden ages to all of them. No wonder it's called the Traveler. It sure does get around. One of these species was the Krill, which would become the Hive. The history of the Hive is incredibly complicated, but to keep it simple, on their planet, well, actually it was the planet that they crashed their planet into. Damn it, I'm already getting sidetracked. Anyway, they have these kind of evil worm gods on the planet that may be as old as the universe itself. Yes, worm gods. So one day, 3 Krill sisters found a dead worm baby. Now, remember this dead worm baby, okay? It's important. Anyway, they thought the dead worm baby was a worm god because it talked them into meeting up with the big worm gods and making a pact with them. The pact was made, and the Krill sisters agreed that in exchange for becoming immortal gods themselves, they would let the worm gods infect the rest of the Krill with little worms, which eventually turned them all into the Hive. These worms enforce what's known as the sword logic on their hosts. It's basically an endless requirement to kill those weaker than you, and in return, you grow stronger and gain access to immense powers, all while feeding the worms in tribute. So the Hive are literally fueled by violence, hell-bent on devouring and destroying everything in their path. Now aligned with the darkness, the Hive destroyed a whole different species that the Traveler had been helping out nearby, so the Traveler just got the hell out of there. Now remember that dead worm baby I mentioned? The twist to all of that is, that dead worm baby wasn't a worm god, it was actually the Witness all along manipulating them. For whatever reason, the Traveler did seem to have a special soft spot for humanity. So, when the Witness arrived to confront it in our system, the Traveler had finally had enough of the drama, and rather than run away again, it took a final stand. Well, I guess the final stand is still to come, so maybe a semi-final stand. One of those Hive sisters from before, Savathun, aka the Witch Queen, was also here during the collapse, and had developed her own complicated feelings about this whole debacle. She realized that she'd been manipulated, so she ended up fighting against the Witness by stealing the veil and hiding it, and then convincing the Witness it had been lost. So the Witness was like, damn, and left. During this battle, the Traveler had given almost everything, and was severely damaged, becoming a dormant husk just hovering over Earth. But with its last breath, it shed pieces of itself, gifting us with the ghosts. These small sentient machines seek out a deceased person who's capable of wielding the light, then resurrects them as a guardian. Now if you're wondering what exactly the light and the darkness are, by the way, they're just space magic. It's like the Force, probably caused by midi-chlorians, or worms, who knows. Anyway, with the companionship of the ghosts, mankind was able to regather and rebuild through a dark age, eventually establishing the last city under the shadow of the dormant Traveler. So all of that happened before Destiny 1 even starts, and I'm skipping over a lot of stuff too. During Destiny 1, we are awoken by our ghost on Earth, and after fighting through some Fallen, okay, side note, the Fallen are basically some more jilted exes of the Traveler who've stalked it to Earth. So after fighting them, we get a ship and head to the last city, where we join the Vanguard. Okay, so side note, the Vanguard are basically the army of Guardians who protect the last city. And there we learn from old mate Speaker of the Darkness's impending return. Then we find a wizard that came from the moon, and learn that the Hive are hanging out there, sucking up the Traveler's power and preparing to invade. So we go deal with that, and then this stranger shows up and tells us to go to Venus, where we meet the Vex. Okay, so side note, the Vex are like hyper-intelligent robots with control of time and space that came from the primordial garden before the universe existed and are bent on controlling all of reality. Turns out we want to stop them from controlling all of reality. And to do that, we have to go to a place called the Black Garden, just a little place outside of space and time, and destroy the Black Heart, a sort of goopy blob which was made as a failed replacement for the Veil, which is also draining the Traveler's power. To get there, we enlist the help of Mara Sov, ruler of the Awoken. Okay, so side note, the Awoken are these kind of humans that basically got sucked into a black hole thing called a Kugelblitz during the collapse, and then they evolved into a different subspecies in a special pocket universe over thousands and thousands of years because time dilation made time go slower there. Then we get a big robot eye and headed to Mars, which is occupied by the Cabal. Okay, so side note, the Cabal are basically this big military empire that likes to conquer stuff. The Traveler never messed with them though, so they're kinda jealous of everyone else. Anyway, we fight them, fight some Vex, destroy the Black Heart, and save the day. And then the stranger gives us a gun that we don't ever use. And now the Traveler can slowly start to heal now that things aren't sucking away at its power anymore. I'm gonna skip over most of what happens in the various Destiny 1 raids and expansions, because it kinda doesn't matter that much. Remember how the Cabal were all jealous that the Traveler didn't ever seem to care about them? Well, a Cabal army known as the Red Legion, led by Dominus Ghoul, come along and absolutely wreck the last city, and chuck some chains around the Traveler to try and get the powers of the light for themselves. This ends up severing the Guardians and their ghost connection to the light too, stripping their powers and making them vulnerable to death. Bit of a butt move. The Cabal then occupies the solar system and puts a big ship known as the Almighty around the sun, so that they can make the sun go supernova in case any of us decide to act up. But act up we do, organising a resistance with some surviving Guardians and non-Guardians, and luckily we also find a shard of the Traveler that we can use to restore our powers, So off we go to find some friends and save the day, finding a way to disable the Almighty and stop Ghoul. As we destroy Ghoul though, like Palpatine, he comes back somehow, and talks to the Traveler, which just seems to piss it off. Reawakened, it sends out a massive burst of light that destroys Ghoul and travels out across the galaxy and beyond, reawakening the Black Fleet. Kinda like sending your ex a message saying, "You up?" Well, they are now. Since then, we've had 7 expansions where quite a lot has gone down. Curse of Osiris was kinda forgettable, although it does feature Osiris, who was this lost warlock, but we learn later that Osiris was actually Savathun all along. Well, not all along, but he was for a while. And then there was Warmind, where we got to kill one of the worm gods in that. Forsaken was a big one though. In this one, we sought revenge after Cade 6, aka Nathan Fillion's beloved character, was killed off by a corrupted Aldrin Sov, brother of the awoken Queen Mara Sov. So we hate that guy now. We also meet the Scorn, which are the Fallen but different. And we got to explore the pocket dimension that the Awoken called home, which was pretty, and home to Riven, the last of a species of wish-granting dragons called Ahamkara. So we kill it. How about you grant yourself a wish and not be extinct? Spoiler alert, he does. Oh, and then we kill Aldrin too, but he comes back to life as a guy called Crow, who's a good guy, so we like him now. Then there was Shadowkeep, where we fought some nightmares. Then Beyond Light, where the pyramid ships arrived and started making planets disappear, which was a very convenient plot device for removing content. We also fought against Kel Aramis, another one who felt jilted by the Traveler. That ball is such a heartbreaker. We also finally got to head inside a pyramid ship, and the Stranger shows up again to ask, what if darkness? And we finally got to wield the darkness ourselves with Stasis. Learning that darkness isn't actually evil, it's only evil if you make it evil. The Witch Queen expansion was also a big one, diving into the backstory of Savathun, who you may remember as the dead worm baby lady who betrayed the Witness. Turns out some of the Hive aren't so bad after all. No, actually she's still evil and was manipulating us so that she could die, get her worm removed, then get reborn with the light and take the Traveler's powers for herself. Although she did claim that this was just so she could protect the Traveler. But we don't believe her and we kill her. Twice. The ending of this was also our first glimpse at the Witness and his big dumb smoky head. And lastly, Lightfall, the most recent expansion which saw the Witness finally confront the Traveler in an epic battle above Earth. So of course we left and went to Neptune to meet the Silver Surfers of Neomuna, a city powered by the Veil itself. This expansion told us basically nothing about the Veil though, but it did give us a grapple hook, which was cool. And at the end we see the Witness open a portal and go into the Traveler with his Black Fleet. But of course, we can't follow through. In the season since, we've met Asha, who is one of the species that turned into the Worm Gods before they were corrupted by the Witness. We found a wish-granting dragon egg and spoke to the Ghost of Riven, who cut us a deal to get into the Traveler if we find more wish-granting dragon eggs. Which we do, but then it turns out that we can only send one person into the Traveler. So we send the Crow, the reincarnated version of the guy that killed Nathan Fillion. And after all these years, what do we find is inside the ball?
Yeah, I don't have to call you Prince anymore, do I?
Nathan Fillion. And that's Destiny, the story so far.